All right, everybody. It looks like most everybody has gotten in from the virtual waiting room, and everybody on Facebook Live. Thank you very much for tuning in. Good morning. It's November 16th. Pretty spectacular looking autumn day in Central Virginia. We appreciate you joining us today. My name is Kevin Wilson, and I am joined by my colleagues Angie Trapp, Leslie Bruno, Tracy Clark, and the woman at the steering wheel, Isabel Toby, is with us today, making sure that all the tech side of things are working just fine. We appreciate you being here, and we are here on a special sort of breaking news webinar where we're going to dive into Governor Ralph Northam's new statewide measures regulating businesses and masks in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Also going to look at some trends around the country. We wanted to go ahead and get this webinar up and out to you as quickly as possible. Obviously, this is a changing situation, just given the nature of the pandemic. And I think that one aspect of whatever you want to call this new normal over the last 8-9 months is that we sort of have to turn on a dime and adjust to new situations. And as always, your Dominion Payroll are here to help you navigate it. So with all that being said, just a couple housekeeping items before we dive into the content. Any questions that you do have, please submit those through the Q&A function you see at the bottom. We will be recording this, recording right now, and it'll be posted to our website, dominionpayroll.com, for your review later. And if you have colleagues that aren't able to join us, sort of with the quick nature of rolling this out, it will be viewable by end of business today. We'll work hard to get that up real quick. As always, you can go to dominionpayroll.com and hit that COVID-19 resource button you see at the top of the homepage, and there you can view our upcoming webinar schedule, register for all of those. You can see previous recordings. So if there's anything that you've missed, please check it out there. There's also, under that forms button, a whole host of resources to help you navigate FFCRA, the PPP loan and forgiveness process, EIDL loans, all sorts of good stuff in there. I know that everybody is tuning in today to wrap their heads around these new statewide regulations, and I don't want to keep everybody waiting. So I think that I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague Leslie, who's going to walk us through some of these specifics. Good morning, Leslie.
Hi, Kevin.
How you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm all right. I'm sad that we're here, but not that we are here, but sad that we have to have additional measures to contain COVID. But I'm happy that we're able to pull this together and talk about it this morning, so we can get some questions answered, hopefully. And I'll just say that, this came out on Friday. He did a press conference and then did a pretty succinct press release. So we had some questions that we think we answered over the weekend, but of course, things are unfolding, as Kevin said. So we're just doing the best we can to get what we know out there. And of course, if you have questions, just submit them and we will answer them. So why don't we dive into the highlights of the amended executive orders. What he did was he took existing executive orders from earlier in the year and amended them to tighten up some restrictions and make some changes. So if you want to go to the next slide, we can dive into the, let me just back up and provide some context. So the reason for this is that Virginia, while not the hottest spot in the nation, is trending upwards with an average of 1,500 newly reported cases per day, which is up from our peak of approximately 1,200 in May. And this is sort of the key pull quote here from Northam. His MO all along has been to try and stay ahead of being a hotspot, to not become one. So these actions on Friday, timed not coincidentally right before the holidays, is to try to keep us from turning into some of these other states that are really, really skyrocketing. And indeed, parts of our state that at the beginning of the pandemic weren't seeing very high numbers, such as Southwest Virginia, now are. So this is definitely not just an urban issue. It's all over the state now. And so he's trying to get ahead of it. as we head into the holidays and the winter time. If we go to the next slide, we can, like Kevin said, we have the 2 executive orders went into effect last night. So they are now in effect. And here are what they said. So the first one is the big one, a reduction, or one of the big ones, a reduction in public and private gatherings. This is limited now to 25 individuals, down from the cap of 250. This includes outdoor and indoor settings. So indoors is a no-brainer, but outdoors it also applies to as well. From what we gather, this is really aimed at social functions. That does not apply to schools or churches, private offices, gyms, and businesses, not apply to sports. Except for recreational youth and high school sports, spectators are limited to 25 spectators per field, or 30% of the venue's occupancy load, whichever is fewer. College athletics are considered sports venues under the entertainment and public amusement guidelines. They are also limited to 250 people, or 30% of the venue's occupancy load, whichever is fewer. The governor's office has clarified that there will be no changes to how fitness classes and gyms can operate. They will remain operating at 75% capacity with a limit of 25 people per fitness class. One of the bigger things about these amended executive orders is that now violators will be subject to a class 1 misdemeanor. That's not new. That's been in place, but it's now more broadly in place, and it's going to be enforced more stringently, is my understanding, and it applies to both individuals and businesses. So if you as an individual don't comply, if you have a party and you have more than 25 people, you can be subject to a class 1 misdemeanor. Or if you're a business and you violate the rules, you can also be subject. So take note of that. If we go on to the next slide, this is the face mask mandate, which is amended Executive Order 63. All Virginians age 5 and over are required to wear face coverings in indoor public spaces. This expands the previous mask mandate, which was in place since has been in place since May 29th, and that set that age minimum at 10. So now kiddos 5 and over need to wear a face mask in indoor public spaces, and that's, again, subject to a class 1 misdemeanor if you.
Hey, Leslie.
Yes.
We didn't specifically say that restaurants were not under that 25 minimum for gatherings. That wasn't on our last slide, but that doesn't apply to restaurants either.
Right.
Somebody asked that in the chat.
Yep. Good call. Thanks, Tracy. So the previous slide, we neglected to mention that restaurants are not subject to the 25-person cap.
They just have to be with the same, 6 feet of space between everybody, and all the things that were in place for them. How they were limited on their capacity is still the same. So if they have outdoor dining, if they have indoor dining, none of that 25 people limit applies to them.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Tracy. So these amended executive orders, this is all of the things that have been in place up until now are still in place in terms of social distancing requirements. These amendments actually just add to that. So they're not scrapping anything that they said before, they're adding to it and tightening up. So thanks for pointing that out, Tracy. That's obviously a key, restaurants are obviously a key group here. I would imagine that would also apply to breweries and other types of gathering spaces where food and beverage are served.
Yeah, they didn't make a distinction between restaurants and bars because they took away the bar part of bars. So.
Well, we don't have bars in Virginia, right? Because we have to serve food.
Well, they took away you can't sit at a bar in a restaurant.
Oh, I see.
Yes,
I got
that's
you.
what I mean.
I see. Sorry. It's been so long since I've been to one. I've forgotten how it works.
Someone did ask about the mask that says, does this apply to childcare settings not in homes, age 5 mask mandate?
That's a really, really great question.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer unless somebody else.
You know what? I'll see what I can find while you're going on.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide then. Okay, so essential retail businesses, all essential retail businesses, which we'll list in just a second, including grocery stores and pharmacies, must adhere to statewide guidelines for physical distancing, wearing face coverings, and enhanced cleaning. While certain essential retails have been required to adhere to these regulations as a best practice, now violations will be enforceable through the Virginia Department of Health as a Class 1 misdemeanor. And again, my understanding is that not only can the patron be charged, but also a representative of the business, the owner or manager on duty, similar to how if you are a server at a restaurant and you serve someone underage, that's how we're looking at this. The server would be liable, and then most likely in that case, someone from the ownership or management would also be liable. So they're taking this very seriously. And so we would like for you to take it seriously, just to make sure not only are people healthy, but also so you all don't get into trouble. There is a site, the Virginia Department of Health does have a site out there where people can report businesses where they've seen either the patrons or the employees violating the rules. And you can, I'll put that in the chat so you know where it is, but just know that that's out there. But I don't know exactly what happens once you hit the submit button. I'm not sure, and maybe we can get someone from the VDH to come talk to us in the very near future to help us see what that process looks like. If we go to the next slide, speaking of bars and breweries, this is one of the new things is the on-site alcohol curfew. The on-site sale, consumption, and possession of alcohol is prohibited after 10 p.m. in any restaurant, dining establishment, food court, brewery, microbrewery, distillery, winery, or tasting room. All restaurants, dining establishments, food courts, breweries, microbreweries, distilleries, wineries, and tasting rooms must close by midnight. Virginia law does not distinguish between restaurants and bars. However, under current restrictions, individuals that choose to consume alcohol prior to 10 p.m. must be served as in a restaurant and remain seated at tables 6 feet apart. So if you're listening and this applies to you, this is obviously new. You probably heard about this over the weekend. I don't know much more about any nuances of this, if there are any. I do know that, again, violators will be subject to a Class 1 misdemeanor. And it's up to you whether or not you want to just close everything down at 10 o'clock and not stay open until 12, but it sounds like you have the option to have a 2-hour window where you're just serving food and not alcohol. That doesn't really help you if you're a bar or a brewery, but these are the new rules.
I'm going to jump. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in real quick. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat. Guys, could you please put those in the Q&A? If we've already answered your questions through the chat, then don't worry about putting the Q&A, but we've got a bunch coming through there. It's hard to manage both the Q&A and the chat. Sorry, thanks.
Thanks, Angie. Yep, and the Q&A allows us to keep these questions forever and ever afterwards so we can make sure we have records. So thanks for playing along with us. All right, and on the next, on the next slide, I just wanted to note, I didn't list the specific guidelines for all of these businesses, but amended order 67 lays out specific guidelines for these types of businesses listed here: farmers markets, non-essential brick and mortar, fitness and exercise facilities, personal care and grooming, AKA spas and salons, campgrounds, indoor shooting ranges, public beaches, racetracks and speedways, large outdoor amusement parks and zoos, entertainment and amusement businesses, and recreational sports. So if you are in one of those categories, you should go in and take a look at the specific guidelines for you. And we have the link for the executive orders in just a second. So we're going to go on to the next one. I mentioned essential retail earlier. Here's a 2-slide list of what they mean by essential retail. They may continue to remain open during their normal business hours. And I won't read all of these, but grocery stores and pharmacies, anything medical. Electronic retailers are essential, automotive parts and accessories, home improvements, and hardware, and other types of retailers, which I know have been booming during this time. If we go to the next slide, we can see the back half of this list: lawn and garden equipment retailers, beer, wine, and liquor stores, thank goodness, retail functions of gas stations and convenience stores, retail located within healthcare, banks, pet and feed stores, printing and office supply stores, laundromats, and dry cleaners. And again, that's all part of amended order 67. You're going to want to go in and take a look at that if you fall into one of those categories. Basically what they're saying is that you need to comply with those guidelines. We're still in phase 3. And so you likely have already been doing a lot of the things that's listed in that order because it's not a new executive order. It's just been changed. So now would be a great time to refamiliarize yourself with what's in that order and what those guidelines say for all business sectors for phase 3 in Virginia. You are required to provide face coverings to your employees. And they say if any such business cannot adhere to these requirements, it must close. And I've got a link there that it doesn't do you much good, so I'll have to put that in the chat as well before we close here. But the phase 3 guidelines are still listed on the governor's website, so check those out when you can. And if we keep moving, and then here's the link for the 63 and 67, which I'll also put in the chat. Oh, real quickly, I wanted to I was curious because I had forgotten what a class 1 misdemeanor in Virginia actually means. And so it's the maximum, it's the most serious misdemeanor offense in Virginia underneath a felony. So not to be scary, but I just wanted to put the information out there. It's punishable, conviction could include up to 12 months in jail, a fine of up to $2,500 or both. And again, from what we can tell, a class 1 misdemeanor can be levied on a patron, an individual, or somebody associated with your business. So it's my understanding that they're going to start to ratchet up enforcement. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, and I don't want to sound scary, but I also want to make sure that you guys keep yourself out of harm's way. And with that, I think I'm going to pass things over to Kevin to talk about some things happening outside of Virginia. Kevin?
Hey, let's answer some of these questions that are in the chat because there's a bunch and it all has to do with what you just went over.
Okay.
Do you want me to take it from here, Tracy, or you want to read them?
I do want to do the first one. Does this
Okay.
apply to the childcare settings? And Mike Hummer, who should be one of our panelists as well, also put in here that the expansion of the mask mandate that all Virginians aged 5 and over are required to wear face coverings in the following settings: indoor public spaces, all schools, public and private. I was looking for that. Mike, if you don't mind sending a link to that, where you found that, that would be fantabulous.
Tracy, I sent you something too through Teams. Did you see that?
Okay. I did not.
Yeah,
I have Teams turned off because it was going crazy.
I know. Well, then Deetra asked, are trampoline parks considered under entertainment venues? We are currently working at 50% capacity. Do we have to limit our capacity any further?
No, you do not. You're a business, and that doesn't qualify for that 25.
So
Yeah,
then Melanie,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it's important to sort of step in and just say from sort of a high level perspective that, you know, this order does add some teeth to the conversation, but by and large, the order doesn't limit, you know, churches and schools. It doesn't limit, you know, gyms, places of business,
or essential or non-essential businesses. It's really aimed at social functions.
Yeah. And so, I mean, think of this really as a Thanksgiving regulation. Obviously, it changes the business environment a bit, but not in the major way that honestly we were a little afraid of when we first read it on Friday.
Right. It's more about like it could affect your business if you were planning to have host a conference for a particular business, or if your business was planning on having a holiday party that was going to host more than 25 people. It's more about social gatherings than it is about limiting business.
well, then that goes right into a couple of the questions. They own a day spa. Does this mean that I'm only allowed 25 people in my spa, including staff and clients?
No.
No. Let me get through a couple of those. Has anything changed for work environment? No. Okay. So these amendments seem to only apply to personal gatherings and bars.
Not even to bars.
I mean, the restriction.
Well, I guess,
But
yeah, if you talk about the curfew, yeah, it does apply to places that serve alcohol.
Okay. If our business hosts a yard sale, would that be prohibited?
Uh,
Oh,
I don't know about that one.
interesting.
I think more it's aimed at like something where you have committed to having 25 people at it. You know, it's not like, I mean, I don't know how you can do that at a yard sale. You're like, okay, 25 people in, 25 people out. I don't know how you could limit that.
Well, this one's from a church, which I think what you read that doesn't include a church, but it says for church environment, as long as we adhere to social distancing, etc., our attendance can be over 25.
Yes.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Just a couple more. Is the strength and enforcement only applicable to an essential retail business or all business?
All businesses.
I'm assuming delivery businesses such as ours are not required to close by midnight. We usually stay up until 3 a.m. every day.
I think the midnight closure is for restaurants and bars and breweries, and it's more like that. I can look that up, but
I guess if you have tables in your establishment and you stop serving anybody at midnight, oh man, I don't know, because it's like, restaurants are to do carry out after midnight.
I'm gonna have to look that one up. I'm not sure.
And then we have two more. I think this is just a statement from Mike. We have first through third grade distance learning program, all over 5 years old. They are all wearing masks. Also, they have dividers between all of them working at their desks during their online real-time web interface. When they need to connect or communicate with their teachers, it's hard for them to communicate clearly over the web with a mask on. The students need to remove the mask when talking to the teachers and the distant classroom. Will this be allowed?
I think as long as you're at the desk and you have social distancing, I think that would be allowed.
And you have the barrier still up.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are going to be a lot of unique situations, and the guidance that we receive from the state doesn't illuminate all of that. And so where there is ambiguity, Mike, I would say specifically to that situation, it sounds like you're doing all the right things in terms of best practices to limit exposure and any sort of virus vector from any one individual. I cannot imagine that the state of Virginia is going to kick in your door and say that third grader is asking a question without a mask on. But obviously we want to be on the right side of the law on all of this. It's hard to say when there's ambiguity like that.
Okay,
And I should say this too, that these, Governor Northam did a press release. He did not have a press conference, so no one was allowed to ask any questions. So, hopefully in the next day or two, they'll be coming out with more clarifications.
Would church service require masks to be worn? Would the misdemeanor apply to the minister?
It looks like in 63, it says any other indoor place shared by groups of people who are in close proximity to each other, masks must be worn. Face coverings may be removed to participate in a religious ritual, which doesn't quite address your question. I would assume that would apply to the minister, but if you're just sitting in the pew in the congregation, it seems like you would need to wear a mask.
It sounds like that too. I mean, it just says face coverings may be removed to participate in a religious ritual, which I'm assuming is like if you were taking
communion.
I think as far as the misdemeanor applying to whether it's a general manager or the minister in this question, I feel very certain that you would have to demonstrate that the authority in that place of worship or business is actively like encouraging people or not doing anything, not saying, hey, everybody wear a mask for them to get that misdemeanor. I think most often the misdemeanor is going to
minister is also far away. It says close proximity, and usually the minister is, much further than 6 feet. But if he's coming around and giving you communion, then yes, he should have a mask on.
Well, and I'm talking about the misdemeanor, like, in terms of like a GM at the local Kroger getting in trouble if people are not wearing masks inside. I think that the GM would have to not be doing any of the work to say, hey, masks are required here, not having signage, not having employees say, hey, please wear a mask, for that misdemeanor to go to that individual. I feel like the burden of the law or the enforcement is going to go to individuals who are willfully ignoring the mask mandate. But I could be wrong on that. If you guys have read, something to really say that this is going to be targeting people in positions of authority at different businesses.
And then Leslie, Teresa said the link you sent via chat is for recap and survey. Could you please resend the link for the updated compliance VDH? Thanks.
I can do that. Thank you for pointing that out. Hold on, let me just.
And there are a couple in the chat that did not come over. Let me just read real quick. Tracy says, I guess the health department is hiring, not our Tracy.
Thanks for that.
And then Edward asked, if a patron brings in an unmasked 5-year-old into the restaurant, who can be charged? And I think that's what you do. We're just going over a little bit, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's the obligation of a business owner and management to train staff to say, hey, there's a new order, that came out from the governor, if you're 5, they need to be wearing a mask. I would recommend, if you're a restaurant or just, public business, that you have some masks available if a 5-year-old doesn't have one. And if you go through that effort and you're like, hey, you have the right to refuse service. I think that if you're willfully ignoring the mask mandate and saying, hey, it's no big deal, get in here, then you're opening yourself up to that liability. So, if your server or your GM or you as the business owner don't want to expose yourself to the potential of getting a class 1 misdemeanor, you do need to take this seriously. If you go through all those steps and the person is saying, I'm not wearing a mask and you're going to serve me, and they're making a big stink, and you're saying, hey, we have the right to refuse service, get out of here until you have a mask on, that I think is going to cover you from a liability perspective. And if there is, an enforcement action, it's going to be levied against the individual who is outright refusing to comply.
That's not where you can refuse. That's a refuse service. I also did find, all restaurants, dining establishments, food courts, breweries, microbreweries, distilleries, wineries, and tasting rooms must close by midnight. It says all restaurants.
Well, then Jill asked, are you still exempt from wearing a mask if you have health conditions?
Yes, I looked that up.
And then Mike says, we've received the all school public and private from the Virginia Council for Private Education. I can send you the email from the VCPE advising us. Mike, send it to the questions@dominionpayroll.com, please.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, we really appreciate that.
Yes, any information. Okay, Kevin, I think that's everything in the queue for right this second.
All right. Well, this is just a quick little bookend to our presentation today. Wanted to take a look, obviously this has been focused on Virginia, but the landscape is changing around the U.S. Notably, Governor Grisham in New Mexico has in the last week ordered a 2-week stay-at-home order that goes into effect today. Governor Brown in Oregon did a partial lockdown for 2 weeks, and that will go into effect on Wednesday of this week. But let's take a look. I pulled these maps from the New York Times. They've done a great job of graphically just sort of representing what's happening around the country. And so, you can see that, businesses around the country are, generally speaking, mostly open. There's some mix of regulations. Really, New Mexico is the only state at this point where we are seeing a return to a pretty sharp lockdown. Hopefully we are able to mask up, wash our hands, and get to a place where more regulations like that are not necessary. I think it's really important to point out that we all have an individual responsibility to just making sure that we stop the spread of this thing, and we don't have to get to a place where businesses are mostly closed. But this is what the business outlook looks like around the country presently. As far as stay-at-home orders go, Puerto Rico has an order or a curfew. There have been some advisories or curfews similar to what we've seen, where it's alcohol has to stop at 9 or 10 p.m. But right now the vast majority, there are not stay-at-home or curfew orders around the country. And then this looks at mask mandates. This obviously shows that the mandatory wearing a mask inside and out is gaining prevalence around the U.S. Obviously, the science shows that is super effective at stemming the spread of this. Some states have sort of a mix. I was just out this weekend with my son, went for a walk around a lake, and saw that it was probably 75% of people outdoor had a mask on, and that was sort of the first time I had seen that. And I mean, I think maybe that's an encouraging sign, and hopefully will contribute to stopping the spread of this thing, and we don't have to have more amended orders that further restrict our businesses. But that is a look around the country. And Tracy, I think you put this slide together. If you want to take the floor for just a minute on travel advisories. I know this is particularly relevant given the holiday coming up next week.
Yeah, so when I was looking around on Friday, when we were all scrambling, like what's going on with all these mandates, I happened to come across some travel advisories. They're actually for the District of Columbia and Maryland, and I knew there had been some travel advisories for New York City and New York State. But actually there are several states that have this. So to keep the coronavirus outbreak from spreading through their regions, more than a dozen states and the District of Columbia have asked or required out-of-state visitors to self-quarantine for 2 weeks upon arrival. And they're all different. Some of them have these quarantines. Some of them tell you you have to have a negative test before you come in, like 3 days before you come in. So it's worth looking into, especially if you feel like you're going to be traveling over this holiday season of Thanksgiving and then Christmas. The rules vary widely and they change with the COVID-19 numbers. So as the numbers of cases, the positive cases go up, these advisories are changing. States have different penalties that they are imposing for non-compliance. So because there's no uniform message across the states, it makes it really hard for people. There is a little link there that you can go to for, it did it state by state on what the quarantine guides were for the different states. So take a look at that if you feel like you're still going to be traveling over this holiday season.
I just posted that link in the chat. Sorry, one of the zillions of websites I have open just started playing music while you were talking, Tracy. Sorry about that.
Didn't hear it. Didn't hear it.
Oh, good. I was like, well, where is that coming from? Yeah, that's good info as we head into the holidays for certain. I had to Kevin's point earlier, I heard an argument from somewhere that people should be motivated to comply with these COVID era restrictions, similar to how they're motivated to comply with the speed limit, because it's safer and it saves lives. And I kind of had a cynical reaction to that. And I said, I think people comply with the speed limit because they don't want to get a ticket. And, for whatever reason, not speeding is a good thing, whether you're doing it because you want to save lives or you're doing it because you don't want to get a ticket or pay a fine. And so it's less to me about one's motivation at this point and more about the collective good. And, as Kevin said, if you as a business owner and your staff do the best that you can with patrons and the patron still refuses to comply, that's definitely on them. But if you are, like I've been in, a Walgreens recently a couple times, and the employees were wearing masks, but some patrons weren't, and the employees just sort of rang them up and let them go out the door. And I was just sort of like, well, that to me would be something that the VDH might be interested in, because they're just not enforced. The employees are not taking responsibility for what's going on in their store and they're not enforcing their own rules. So in any case, that's my little soapbox speech.
We do have a couple more questions. Lisa asked, any updates on extending EPSL or EFMLA?
I'll
So
jump.
go ahead.
I was just going to say that I certainly haven't seen anything out of Washington on that right now with this sort of state of U.S. politics. The Senate is squarely focused on Georgia politics and the runoff election coming up in first part of January. It really doesn't look like there's a lot of interest in any economic stimulus or extension of any of the regulations or benefits that we've seen over the last several months right now.
I guess I'm looking at websites right now that said the chances of the FFCRA extension are likely.
Really?
I don't know how quickly that will happen. I don't know if there's going to be like a break while we transition, and then they'll start them back up again. Certainly for people who are in payroll, we would like to see that break and then wait until the new year, because it throws a monkey wrench into our systems. However, I don't know how that extension will look. Will they just say, okay, if you have any time left over, you can carry it over into the new year? Or if they're going to start all over again and say, okay, you get another 2 weeks, that we don't know. But the FFCRA has overwhelming bipartisan support. So I would look for that to be extended at some point.
And then Teresa says DC and Maryland are part of the Tri-City area in which our people go into each day. Does this apply to workers?
It didn't look like that it applied to workers. It was more about like tourists coming to the area or visitors, prolonged visitors. So definitely take a look at that.
And then Dorothy says, sometimes you can't blame the employee for not enforcing the mask mandate. My son was fired from his job because he tried to enforce customers wearing masks, but his manager said not to.
Ooh,
That's tough.
I'd like to dive into that one. No, I mean, this is really a really great question, Dorothy, all jokes aside. I think he was fired illegally, to be honest, and he certainly should not have been. I don't know where he works or what location or what the circumstances were. I mean, obviously you want to make sure you're polite to customers. A service station. I guess
that's an essential business too. So
yeah, that is an essential business. It's laid out pretty clearly.
Yep.
So that manager, I mean, if I were, I don't know how far you want to take it, but he might have a claim against that manager for doing that. I mean, if he was harassing the customer or picking some sort of argument, that's one thing. I still don't think it would be a termination, though. I think that would be, still think that would be inappropriate. But
She
yeah,
was
that's
saying, she was saying that the manager wasn't enforcing it. The employee, her son was trying to, and that's why he got fired.
right.
I think there's a place you can report that. I feel like I came across a website where you can report if they're not in compliance.
Yeah, she said he told his manager that he did not feel safe.
And there is that specific clause in the Virginia Workplace Safety Temporary Standards. I think I'm getting all those words right. Saying, you know, there are worker protections in there saying that workers can't be retaliated against, you know, for saying that they don't feel safe and you
Yep,
don't want.
you're exactly right.
Yep, that is true. I would, Dorothy, if I were you, I would have your son or you go to the VDH website and report that business, and then give the Virginia Department of Labor and Industry a call and report the termination and talk to them about his options. Because I don't think that went down the way it should have.
Not at all. And then somebody asked, can employee use EFS, I think they're talking Esick and EFMLA for 1 hour at 2/3 pay?
So you can, but there are some caveats around EFMLA. For instance, the first 2 weeks are unpaid, and you also have to be an employee for at least 30 days to qualify for the EFMLA. If you want to use the Esick for 1 hour as I'm assuming you're doing it for childcare reasons, since you have the EFMLA listed as well. The answer is yes, if the other conditions are met.
And Dorothy said, thank you guys.
We are always happy to help as much as we're able, given the limited info and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dorothy's question, I'm going to chat with some sources about that, but not only does it, Kevin was right, the emergency temporary standard that's in place right now does specifically say that employees may not be discriminated against. And, you know, we all know that people fall on across a spectrum of opinions about this virus, you know, everywhere from one end, people who think it's a hoax, to the other end where people are completely in favor of a complete lockdown. And a lot of that is, you know, this is all against the political backdrop. And so, you know, it could be scary for some employees to go up against their managers or customers who don't believe in any of this stuff. And so it's easy for us to sit here and, you know, talk. But when you're out there actually doing the work and afraid for your job, we totally understand that it's maybe feels safer to not say anything. And my hope is that, again, for whatever reason, somebody complies. Maybe they think this is all a hoax, but they don't want to get fined. Great, you know, like whatever their motivation is. My hope is that these new actions will at least convert some of those folks to believers, in the sense that, okay, well, I don't really agree with this whole mask mandate, but I also don't want to pay $2,500 or go to jail. I don't know if they're going to send people to jail, but and you know, if I have employees who don't fall on the same area of the spectrum as me, you know, let's honor that and accommodate them, and also abide by the rules, so we can get through this. And if they don't abide by the rules, then I think people have the right to speak up. And you know,
Well,
in a way
not just employees. I mean, people who visit your establishment can report you for not enforcing the mask law.
right.
So, you know, there is that too. And Kathy put in the chat, said early on there were physical altercations with attempting to enforce masks. We instructed our staff to offer a mask but not refuse service. Their safety was more important. And I agree with that. However, now there's a little bit more bite to this, and you could be fined. And if that's something that, you feel strongly about, then you're going to have to, sit with your employees and say, we're going to have to refuse service if people don't wear a mask.
Yeah, I mean, we're not asking people to ration food yet or anything. It's just a face covering, for Pete's sakes, but I understand it's
Well,
scary.
And if you're
scary out
not
there.
an essential business, then you can refuse service. I mean, you don't have to say everyone can come in and be served here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know, and it's hard to refuse business right now. I mean, every dollar counts. So, I would say, like Kevin or Tracy said, sit down with your team and talk about it and make sure everyone's on the same page and let them know what they're allowed to do and that you have their back at the end of the day, if everything's handled in the right way. And see how it works out. Hopefully patrons will begin to I mean, 1 in every 400 people now has COVID in this country. And that window is just going to keep closing. And then we're just going to be here again in 6 weeks with more restrictions. So I just feel like, Northam's really trying to, like Tracy said, put some bite into this. We'll see what happens on the enforcement side. And I'll continue to look into that and see what that enforcement really does look like.
I think here we are at 10:48. Probably a good time as ever to say thanks to everybody coming out. If you do have any last minute questions, get those into the Q&A. But otherwise, join us. We will be here Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is our big client year-end seminar, where we're going to be talking about all the stuff that you need to wrap up your year, from bonus payrolls to the tax situation, benefits administration, you name it. So that's 9 to noon on Thursday, and you can register at dominionpayroll.com.
And we're still on today at 11.
That's right. Training here at 11. And then tomorrow we'll be talking about some, actually, what is on the schedule for tomorrow?
So today we're doing the iSolved overview at 11. Tomorrow we're going to talk about PPP reporting. We'll go over the safe harbors, the exceptions, pretty much anything you want to talk about PPP.
And Wednesday, the Beacon is coming at you live. We're going to be taking a look at COVID and the tech revolution, just the way that, this move to virtual and telemedicine and the Internet of Things, 5G, all this stuff has been widely adopted in a really short period of time. And so at 11 a.m., I've got 2 great guests joining me to talk about the changes sort of in the tech landscape for us. So I hope you'll join Wednesday at 11 for that conversation. All right, folks, if we don't have any other questions, Angie, Leslie, Tracy, do you have anything you want to wrap up with?
I'm good, thank you.
I think
I'm
we're
good.
good.
All right. Well, folks, everybody be safe out there. Stay well. As always, we are here for you. If burning question pops into your head, please reach out to questions@dominionpayroll.com. We are happy to field those questions and give you the best insight with the guidance that we have available to us. And we look forward to seeing you again throughout the week. Everybody take care and have a good Monday.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye.
Guys.